in the recent Australian election, which was a shock loss to Labor, there were some obvious parallels with the Trump election and the previous Brexit election in the UK as well. The obvious thing being that the polls just completely got it wrong. They were going Labor 51-49. The end result was exactly the opposite. It was coalition 51, Labor 49. They just completely got it wrong, to the bafflement of the cognoscenti and the leftist establishment. It was also a bit Trumpian in that, like America with its Rust Belt, Australia also had a region that was had been kind of studiously neglected by the cultural and political elite. Queensland, it wasn't exactly a Rust Belt, but it was an agrarian, rural, largely conservative part of the country, which Labor took for granted, as the Democrats did in the US. I might say at the outset, just to clear the air, I was a lot less excited that the coalition won than that Green Labor lost. The coalition doesn't exactly represent my philosophical view of the world, as it fails to do with a lot of other people and a lot of conservatives. So they were the parallels. Perhaps could be reasonably portrayed as Australia's Trump moment. Because the pundits are trying to figure out just what's going on in the electorate, in contrast to what the opinion polls were saying. What were the issues that made the difference? And an issue that perhaps you could say dare not speak its name was the religious issue, the fact that a lot of Australians, despite the certitude of Rugby Australia and the elites and the cognoscenti about Israel Folau and how right it is to prescribe somebody like him, that a lot of people in Australia knew that Green Labor were really going to come down heavily on Christians. And you might think, well, Australia's not really a Christian society. It has been historically, but a lot of people in Australia realised what direction we were heading in with the Green Left. They would actually have probably done away with what could be described as freedom of religion, freedom of religious thought in Australia. They would have severely curbed religious freedoms in this country. And I think a lot of people understood that and voted accordingly and showed their disapproval of that, a move in that direction. Israel Folau's suspension from rugby for quoting a Bible text over the internet, that was his crime. That suspension from his contract occurred the day before the election, and I think would have probably focused a lot of minds on that particular issue. And that religious issue was, of course, understated during the campaign and in the post-election analysis. There were tax issues as well, the war against retirees and the like. But certainly one of the really, really major issues was that Labor were going to hit Australia with this vast scheme of implementing policies relating to renewable energy, which was going to be hugely expensive, which they refused to divulge how much it would cost because it would immediately be a vote loser, combined with the fact that I think a sufficient number of Australians realised that this vast expenditure and these vast programs that Labor were going to implement and severely affect Australians' hip pocket was going to achieve absolutely nothing to change the world's climate. Like a minor technicality that, but you know. Yeah, a minor technicality that. Don't know why I mention it. I mentioned in a recent video how climate change is a darling issue of the left when you look at how it's characterised, that they thought the Earth was warming up some years ago, and maybe it is. But the explanation for this has got to be in the realm of conscious and deliberate political activism. It has to be something you can influence through political action. And the clinching argument is that all the scientists believe in climate change. I like the way the language follows this issue that people are now described as being pro-climate. It's a bit like being pro-mountains or something, pro-sunshine or something. So presumably you've got people who are pro the climate and people who are anti the climate. They're getting back to the point that all the scientists tell you that the world is warming up, and the problem is that all the scientists vote green left. And so this could have something to do with the way they make sense of the world, including their science, although it's supposed to be facts and figures. That figure, incidentally, has been seriously challenged. The figure of 97% of scientists believing climate change has been challenged. But the point I'm making is that people for whom political activism is such a central part of their life, you don't have to be a genius to work out what kind of climate change phenomenon they're going to prefer. It's obviously going to be one that involves conscious and deliberate human action that can be influenced or changed through political activism. Therefore, they don't want to know about the Earth warming up because of the action of sunspots or something like this. And I was making the point that even then they would find some way of construing the issue, presenting the issue in a way that somehow engages conscious and deliberate human action, human political philosophy of some kind. And getting back to the election, polling has indicated that a tremendous number of Australians, so we are told, believe in the sort of leftist climate change philosophy. But in the election, that political viewpoint was defeated. And that rejection is a rejection of, in terms of pure numbers, it was a rejection of that philosophy. But more to the point, what it showed was that a population will mouth a lot of platitudes, especially progressivist political attitudes, as long as they don't have to pay for it, which was certainly the message of this election. And on another note, there's a video doing the rounds of people in Toronto being interviewed about whether they support increased intake of refugees. And of course, almost to a man and woman, they say, oh, of course, yes, no, we must have more refugees, no caps on immigration. And then they pull out, they've got this guy off camera who is an actual asylum seeker. And they're asked, well, this guy right here, like, he needs a house. He needs a roof over his head today. And of course, they all have their excuses for not putting this guy up. And it's so illustrative, that the people are so good, which gets back to the polling issue too, I suppose. It just demonstrates the degree to which people will come out with a lot of things they think they're supposed to say, but when it comes down to like paying for it or putting themselves out, it's a completely different story. And this highlights a really important aspect of leftist philosophy that is routinely utilised, and that conservatives have a lot of trouble dealing with and grappling with. And that is that the allure of leftist philosophy for the population at large is that leftists, I've been describing it in recent times as flattering people, flattering the populace, you know, flattering people with the idea, the Enlightenment idea, that the human mind is the kind of ultimate kind of arbiter of truth. That the human mind and its thinking processes are the ultimate truth. You know, not that they're an ultimate truth, that's one of the reasons why, because you can make it up as you go. But it's the operating principle for the way we're supposed to live our lives. And so if the climate's changing, well, it's obviously got something to do with what humans do. When we can change that, we can change the way humans think, and we can change the way people behave, and we can change that, all that, through political action. And people love that. People like that idea. It goes back on a deeper level. It's the freedom versus power, or not freedom and power being two sides of the same coin. People love that, would you believe? And so there's this constant theme in leftist philosophy about rationalizing things into an intellectually digestible form, and that true conservatism must meet this appeal to reason, so-called, which is really a cult of rationality, with the enduring truths of life, which are not subject to human reasoning. For example, of course, gender differences. And as I've said so many times before, decades ago, I would have said, if you let this way of thinking go far enough, they'll wind up one day saying we can choose our gender, which in 2019, hey, would you believe? Of course, that's what they're doing. And that's why it's so wrong. Gender differences are like the law of gravity, of course. And any enduring truth, including the law of gravity, which incidentally I might say that in the same-sex so-called marriage plebiscite in Australia, just to lay my cards out, I did not vote. I did not vote based on the principle that I wanted the majority of Australians to not participate in this nonsense, because it was an insult to the intelligence, because it was an insult to the human mind, and that was my position. And frankly, they may just as well have had a plebiscite where they were proposing to revoke the law of gravity. It's an illustration of what I'm talking about. And I go back to one of the seminal issues of the 60s that got us. People are constantly saying, how did we get to this point? And they say, oh, you know, leftism started out all right, but it went bad. Oh, in recent years, blah, blah, blah. There's no recent years. It goes back to the 60s, the moral collapse, the spiritual vacuum, the moral collapse of Western society. Back in the 60s, the Western world had a mental breakdown. And the kids out on the streets who had the energy and the enthusiasm to push for social change and met with a conservative society, which was simply a pushover and remains a pushover. That was the genesis of the world we've got today, with the aforesaid question of gender fluidity, which is complete and utter nonsense. How did we get to a point where this stuff can be... I'm not talking about people supporting it, there are enough of those. I'm talking about people who take this stuff seriously. You know, I mean, there are really... I cannot believe that parents are quite happy to have their children going to schools where this stuff is taught in the classroom. But they are. And back in the 60s, one of the seminal issues, which was deemed to have, that imprinted itself on the 60s. That is what led to the great social revolution of the 60s. This is the Vietnam War protests I'm talking about. No, they did not work a social revolution. That social revolution would have happened anyway. This is a classic illustration of how it works. This was co-opted. This issue was co-opted. See, back in the 1960s, the reason why the anti-Vietnam War campaign was so successful, the Americans made a complete botch of it and the war dragged on for years and years. That was a big factor. But it was the fact that you had a society, especially of young people, who were just completely open to this idea that it's the conscious human mind that by which we should judge truth and reality. And just as now, what you had, if you look at that, I won't go into all the mechanics of the Vietnam War, but basically what you had was a generation of young people who desperately wanted to believe in a political movement in the third world, talking about peace, justice, and equality, talking about those things, even though anybody with more than half a brain knew that the end of this war would be millions of people living under a totalitarian communist police state. They knew that. But it didn't matter, because what trumped everything was this appeal to reason, this appeal to, there are people out there talking about justice and talking about equality and talking about peace. Talking about peace, oh yes. In the Vietnam War, the communist side in the war was not fighting a war. They were fighting a revolution. It was only the evil Yankees who were fighting a war. I like that one. But that encapsulates the whole thing. To support this vicious, terroristic, communist movement called the Viet Cong, and there's a lot to be said about that historically, but we'll just how they were so much of a pawn of basically a militaristic nation state. But anyway, that's another thing. The fact that people want to think in these terms is really what we should be focusing on. And the chickens have come home to roost in the modern world in 2019. This is what the left is up to. And this is what conservatives don't really get. Because, as I mentioned previously, it all comes down to the flattering of the human mind and psyche. The conservatives are just as subject to as anybody else. And it takes a special kind of person to resist these blandishments and come out with some kind of reasonable philosophical stance towards the world.